Right, quickest audio essay in the whole world, and I'd so much prefer to do this in handwriting, but it's going dark. My years being an environmental, serious operator, super quick highlights. There's a reason for this. So, after in 2009, personally, starting December 2008, in 3 months, with no help, only fake interest from even my some-year friend, Birgit Cunningham, and others who started a Facebook group called Stop Jack Straw's Gagging Order, because Jack Straw said he was going to reverse my law in Parliament December 2008. Within 3 months, 4 months, and actually at considerable personal risk, I got him to change his position in public. He did a U-turn. He had an article written by the Times, in fact it was basically written by me, saying he's a liar, he was a hoodwinker. Now, I don't mess around. In fact, that was the only real surprise in my life, because I thought that would take a year. It only took 4 months. The way I did that was by sending out emails and sometimes making phone calls, suggesting to those who may be monitoring, because they do, that there were far more people who were going to stand up against his lying statement of December 2008. Anyway, fast forward. So in 2010, despite being in terrible child loss grief, that year I reported in and orchestrated the following. Hay Festival was using, and this is the important thing. This is the important thing about Hay Festival, Hay-on-Wye, and the region, which includes Hereford, making out. Hay Festival would have many green talks by all the great and good of environmentalism, from George Monbiot, Polly Higgins, both of whom were total fakes, and I have interviews with them showing how they are effete and actually couldn't care. Monbiot may have done more good, but Monbiot certainly isn't perfect. But to the point, Hay Festival, despite having many, or charging people a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of pounds for green speakers. I'm sure these days they have Kate Humble, etc., etc. They had that year EOS First Class Only Airlines as main sponsor. Their signs emblazoned all over the place. I couldn't believe it when I dejectedly wandered through the site, and I dobbed them into The Guardian, which resulted, but this was well known, they knew about this, which resulted in, I made sure I copy everything, I don't hide. I copied my material that I reported them in. I copied it to Hay Festival. A week later, Peter Florence was hauled in to a Radio 4 studio and given a bit of a grilling on this, ostensibly in the name of Anne Brichto, who's Anne Eddyman, but in actual fact it was completely set up by me. And I even put forward somebody, Rosie Bashford, as a kind of, she would be there available as, here's a representative of the local community who would like to speak to you about this. Anyway, that basically succeeded. The year later, the massive, huge development plan for Hay-on-Wye, whereby the main car park, 2010. Now, by Glaisbury, I happened to live in a caravan off-grid, hidden away for a few years. One of the large, tough, thuggish farming families owned some land about 2 miles upstream from Hay-on-Wye. The most protected area of the banks of the River Wye is just below the Hollybush, what used to be the Hollybush Inn. It's probably changed by now. A Schedule 2 protected riverbank, large, hidden away, not hidden away, just in a place not publicly accessible easily. Gravel bank where the little ringed plovers nested a very, 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 well, an endangered bird species, and thus was designated Scheduled to Protection, which is extremely, well, it's probably the next, I assume there's a Schedule 1, which would be golden eagle chicks. Now, in summer 2010, it may have been 11. I have brilliant diaries elsewhere. Everything is photographed and filmed. Every single bit of what I now say is photographed, filmed, and almost always I would walk around from then with an audio recorder on all the time for protection, i.e. in what I'm about to describe. I would, large farming concern would at dawn go down to these shingle areas with a JCB and large tractor trailer, one of the ones that probably takes about 20 tons, and they would be JCBing out shingle so that they didn't have to buy their own for the large glamping horse centre that they then proceeded to build. 3 times I reported a great risk, because they would know if they were reported in, they would assume it was me. And big, thuggish, nasty buggers. 3 times I reported this in to the Brecon Beacons National Park, who are the sort of environmental authority in the region, and once by an anonymous phone call, secondly by an email that was kind of anonymous, each time saying, if you call this number, and promise to keep my identity secret, I have film of this heinous illegal act. And then a 3rd time I actually bumped into somebody at the river on a canoe with a small group, who then told me he was a member of, he worked in the offices of Brecon Beacons National Park. Not one person got back to me ever to, it was clear, and I could say to people, well, actually, I do legal work at the highest level. This is categorical, clear-cut evidence of severe crime. Now, this is not pollution. Actually, this should start as follows. In 1999, aged 6 months, the summer of 1999, my daughter paddled in the River Wye at the Warren for the first time. Then, even putting her little 6-month-old toes into the shallows, there would be minnows nibbling at her toenails. For the next 11 summers, we spent almost, we probably were down there every other day, half the day, at the Warren Beach by a mile upstream from Hay-on-Wye. Throughout that 11 years, at the beginning, there were fantastic fish stocks. The children would be paddling, swimming in the river, and continually giggling due to a continual nibbling of many, many, many minnows per child. By 2010, there were basically hardly any, and a few years later, the river was officially going sterile, toxic. Now, they blame it on, it's algae. No. The river was dead. There was too many nitrates and other pollutions in the balance of the river. I mean, a river like that should be more or less clear. It's as simple as that. In all its evolutionary history prior to the dawning of modern agriculture, and using, in the last 50 years, many more chemicals in the water system than ever before, the river, for various reasons, has got such that it hardly sustains life. That's it in the nutshell. So over 11 years, basically, of my daughter's childhood, that river, by 2010, 11, 12, 13, there's hardly any minnows left. Full stop. So, A, reporting in the matter of the bank, nothing done. Now, that's not a pollution, of course. But by the very early 10s, we were aware that the river was in a disastrous mess. Next year, although this is not technically environmental, but it is, it's all connected. This is all green politics, localized, local trade in small communities, etc., etc. Now, I've been going to little community meetings about these things for 40 years. There is nothing new. We try and have a local food chain, food supply system, etc., etc. We try and build our towns, etc., such that the need to use a car is minimized. Now, massive development planned, I think about 2009 they first announced it. Move the primary school from aside the main Hay car park, move it out, and nobody actually said the following bit, but this is actually the truth of it, move it out about nearly a kilometre, half a mile, onto an area of the football playing fields. Now, I dislike sport myself. I've never played sport. I dislike it entirely. But there was a strip of that football playing fields which was protected by a community trust set up to protect the land for the townspeople. No, they wanted to move the school onto that, move the doctor's surgery further out onto that, I believe, or at the very least make a car park, etc., etc. And where the primary school was up until that point, build a supermarket. Now, the big joke was, well, it will be a Waitrose. They always waffle that one. Anyway, so the town, as of about 2009, set up various funds. We're going to have a legal battle, and being just absurd, pathetic, their line gradually became, well, we need to raise £30,000 for the first, because most of the town were against it, for the first round in a legal fight in the High Court. Now, I told them straight away, and I am actually probably one of Britain's citizens' rights legal fight, if not the expert in the country. I'm certainly one of the top 5. I said to them nicely, you fools, you've been quoted £30,000 by your barrister, and what happens is that you may even win round 1. Then there'll be an appeal, and you'll probably lose that, at which point your barrister will say, oh, terribly sorry, but we've got to now have another £50,000 up front because an appeal is more complicated. And even if you won the appeal, then there could be a third round when your barrister will say they want £100,000 up front. I said to them, don't be daft. This is absolutely absurd. You're just basically virtue signalling and being absurd into the bargain. About 6 months later, summer 2011, I took a photograph of, now this sounds personal, but it's not. There was a well-known financial link between the director of Hay Festival and the developer who would be doing the work to rebuild the new school at this new location, which would be current primary school, walking distance for anybody in the town. Moved out, you would end up, it wouldn't be the centre of the community anymore, and people would drive out to that school in their cars, just creating exactly the opposite of what you want, because there was a great little school in pretty much in the middle of town. So I took a photograph of the director of Hay Festival, Peter Florence, because it was said on reasonably good authority he had a financial link with the developer, who were called Asgard. And the photograph I put on some Twitter, and I made sure Hay Festival saw this, saying, it was the photograph of his wife, Becky, saying, the caption underneath was, don't worry, you don't have to shop in Co-op for much longer. Peter's going to buy you a Waitrose. Within a week, all plans for that development stopped. I also, the same weekend, it was the second weekend, it may have been the first weekend of Hay Festival 2011, I put a tweet out saying, and I hardly use social media myself, put a tweet out, a great risk, this is a great risk to myself, because these people have heavies. Hay Festival have a big security operation. I put a tweet out saying, call for strike. The stewards, who the festival legally depend on to operate, their kids go to this primary school. They don't want it moved. and their friends have the small local shops, which are without a doubt going to suffer if this development goes ahead. We call for a strike of the stewards. And I know they got the tweet because I happened to meander into the festival site a few days later, and a security guard was put straight on me. And I've never caused any person in person any problem in my life ever. And in fact was very well known in the area as being only a totally placid person. It was quite funny. I remember him following me into the bog. He thought I wasn't watching him. He thought I didn't see him following me down a long alleyway, a tramway. Anyway, so I did those two things single-handedly, blah, blah, blah. More, actually, they are important because it ended up with the school was left in place, was redeveloped, and no, there wasn't a second supermarket put there, and that was down entirely to me, despite the fact that at the time, for 3 years, 2010, 11 and 12, I was suffering the most terrible child loss, full grief. Now that's relevant. I only put that in because I'm going to go forward now into 2014. Clearly, all the rivers of the area, I had moved 10 miles away to 3 miles outside Kington, linking up with Green politicians in West Herefordshire. All the rivers were destroyed. The chicken sheds were beginning to come along. And here's the important thing. So, there are democratic processes, full stop, which are quite straightforwardly. First of all, you support your Green parliamentarian or your candidates. You support them in all sorts of ways. You get involved. You deliver leaflets for them. You try and get them elected. That's the first of many. In terms of all development that has ruined all the rivers, particularly the Wye, but the Arrow as well, which became my nearby river, you have to go to planning meetings to object when there are new chicken sheds coming along, etc., etc., etc. This full democratic process, and at the planning meeting, you make sure you actually drag your MP with you, which may require a concerted letter writing campaign. You make sure that the recordings that go into media, it's all a big job, but it's just straightforward democratic processes that have been around for about 300 years. For 3 or 4 years, with various hats on, I was very aware of all sorts of development. With a young woman who tried to take interest, she was basically blocked all the way, and she was such a pure, never had drunk drink in her life, smoked a joint like all the children of these pretend hippies that live throughout Herefordshire. Total Puritan, and actually she was a bell ringer at the church. She was total, without criticism, young woman, yet the middle-aged women who pretended to be green in the area literally sabotaged her. I'm going to write a full essay about that at some point. In fact, I probably have referred to it. Right, so what do we have? What did we really have? Over 3 or 4 years, we had the straightforward democratic process that should be engaged in was not engaged in. Now, why does this matter? What really happened was over 5-10 years, a whole class of mainly women, and I speak with women about this, and they say, yes, it is mainly women. And furthermore, the Green Movement knew when I joined 40 years ago, you have to have as many women involved. Mainly women joined groups. I founded the first Friends of the Earth. We were the first 5 people who founded Hay on Wye Friends of the Earth, 2007, I think it was. It collapsed straight away. Anyway, mainly women come along, take interest. They're usually educated from down south. They've semi-retired to areas like the Marches. But all they're interested in is the healing, their herbal medicine, their spirituality, their past life structures, their chakra, the whole damn thing. And much more importantly, when you're trying to have a conversation, which is, listen, how can we make sure we have, instead of 5 people at this planning meeting, 50, are the 3 or 4 people in where you live who may be on our side, who may not have vehicles that you can give a lift to too? No. All you had over 5 years was every excuse. Well, it wasn't. They're not excuses. It's worse than that. It's insidious. It's, well, you don't quite have the same energy as me. And I have a particular way of manifesting change, and I'm going to stick on my little path, which meant they did nothing. Many of them are the sort of parents, and I knew many personally, who had their children at the Steiner, or in fact Fairfield, which was a great school. These are those who in theory, well, unfortunately it's all gone very wrong and become so self-obsessed, and the manifestation, their favourite word, is that the environment of West Herefordshire and East Powys is destroyed, because they are the educated and usually slightly better off, with some qualifications, some more likely to have a university background. They are the group who, for centuries, are those who should hold power, greedy, corrupt power, to account. They should have solidarity, and they are able, via their slightly better education, to do the work, to hold in a region, just in a small-scale way, power and greedy, destructive behaviour to account. Over 10 years, I was often there, not as a leader, because I'm quite a demure person, but as a very active person, keeping my ears open. What do we need to do? What do we need to do? There's a planning meeting coming up. The first thing we need to do is to arrange car share, so that increases the possible numbers. No. There would always be some middle-aged woman at some meeting who basically was so snide and would essentially via, oh, well, I'm not sure if we quite need to be doing things in this way or that way. Basically, actually, it's too strong a word to sabotage. In her own neurotic and lack of esteemed, because they didn't know what they were doing, way, the net effect of their attitude would be to destroy solidarity. Most of these women, also, it just so happens you can actually loosely call them slightly man-hating. But that sounds like I've got an axe to grind. Not in the slightest. It used to actually make me kind of laugh, but cry, because endlessly there was no solidarity due to the exact people who would call themselves more community orientated via their spiritual practices, their alternative medicine, their alternative this, alternative that, and alternative the other. I know many of these people. They would all sit and have their kind of let's pass the parley stick kind of approach to everything, and we must all be respectful of one another, but they spend all their energy actually trying to control one another than ever doing anything. And that is why over 5 or 6 years nobody held to account over development around the Y and then around the arrow, etc. Now, I, though, just keeping on until autumn 2022, when I put a massive push into attempting to roll out to, unfortunately, those are the people who you need to recruit as your allies. The great idea of Lucy Hurd's councillor for Hereford and ex-Lib Dem MP candidate, who wished to put in a designated river bathing area. Well, as soon as I heard about it from her, 90 minutes, me and her and her assistant Sam Potts sat in a huddle in her Hereford offices. I then rolled this out to 7 or 8 other communities from Brecon, Hay-on-Wye, Kington, Erdisland, Knighton, Prestine. going to people there that I vaguely knew. They might not like me very much, but it's like, you know that your rivers, Arrow, Lug, Tame, Wye, are also totally ruined. This is a great idea by a Liberal Democrat woman. No nonsense. I've got write-ups on about it. Anyway, I would go around speaking with people, not formally, just seeing who I met, or sometimes seeking out people I knew from a few years earlier. And what do you think of this idea? You need one of these at your spot. Every single one of about 30. Great idea, great idea. I was actually quite surprised. Quite a few of them had sort of crossed the street to avoid me a few years earlier. Oh, great idea, great idea. Not one of them ever followed it through. If I encountered them later on, a week later, 2 weeks later, they'd literally forgotten the conversation, which each time I'd invested at least an hour explaining to them actually what is a simple idea, but politicking that Lucy Hurds categorically was pushing this forward. There were 2 others in the country. I think there's a few more now. But anyway, these are the people who would go to nice little folk festivals, who will be doing yoga, who, yes, have their kids at the Steiner School, who consider themselves very together people. Those are unfortunately the people that own the communities virtually. I don't mean financially. They own the cultural capital within communities. So many. Yeah. And then never, ever followed it through. The few that I then carried on trying to communicate with, if I had their numbers, text, email, whatever, the few that said they were going to email me, never, ever, ever followed it through. They are the reason that the environment of the marches is destroyed. You will find them in the health food cafes of Hereford. You will find them sitting around being smug in Hay-on-Wye. And they alone. Power will always be corrupt, greedy, money-orientated, and careless. Those people are the natural democratic check and balance in the community at the local level. They did nothing except gossip, perform, and actually perform the serious illness of people-pleasing. Myself, then, similar situation with the development at Titley, near to Titley Pool. Massive development. I've written that up. I think it's in a page. It might be in Rights Fights, a post on ralphskism.com called Rights Fights. I think I wrote a week ago, roughly the 12th or 13th of March. And then, worst of all, 2019 and 20. Herrick Hill, superb, pretty wild, although commercial forestry had been left for many years. I'd been walking that area for over 10 years. A massive operation began to fell huge areas of forestry in what is a very, very, it's not a pristine region, but there are no houses, no farms around, up around Herrick Hill along the Mortimer Trail. And they were doing this in the breeding season for birds. April, May, June, July. Illegal. I was horrified. I tried to speak with people, and now I was under great risk, even suggesting that I may think that the owners, the contractors, the big bully boys of that region might be in the wrong. But I tried to recruit 1 or 2 people to help me. Maybe we can try and start a little bit of an awareness or even a legal campaign to hold to account the fact over 2 spring and summers they were categorically in breach of the law. 2020, the McCurrach family bury alive. And now the McCurrach family are leading members of Extinction Rebellion. Rob McCurrach was the Hereford up until about 2020, I think. Maybe a year earlier, he started to get ill, but was the Herefordshire Council spokesperson on the environment and a town councillor in Kington, and he gets grant money for being a nature custodian, 80 acres they had called a wood called Kennel Wood. They cleared half of it in 2020, and in the process buried alive a huge sanctuary badger set right up in the hills. I photographed and videoed this at great risk to myself. Again, tried to recruit, and I attempt to recruit support, solidarity. It's always among the artists, the animal lovers, or people who say they are, the environment lovers. I had months of bullshit. Nobody ever. Two-faced bullshit. Like, I had to be so careful. Nobody ever actually came forward and did anything. Ditto, in the same valley, I was trying to recruit supporters. Supporters is the wrong word. It suggests money, never money. Just people to help me stake out the Sheepwalk Lakes, where two otters I saw. I think it was summer 2018. Wow, we got otters. I think they're going to be making this their home. Was it summer? No, it might have been very early spring, actually. Anyway, I knew for a fact several farms around there are going to kill them because they made money from sport fishing. At Flintshire Pool, they made exactly £600 a year per person they granted a license to, and they had about 15. It's called a syndicate. So that's £9,000 a year. For £9,000 a year in fees, those otters would be killed. The otters were about 3/4 of a mile from the big pools called Flintshire Pools. So I tried to recruit one or two people I knew. They said they were nature lovers. Could you help me? I want to be there at dawn and try and film these otters, and then I can go and try and apply for a grant so that this could be fenced off, the pools rented. Maybe we may have to get them fenced off, and we can get them protected properly. No, bullshit. Within about 2 months, those otters were killed. Easy to do because they're actually easy to track otters. Nobody would help. It's just a joke. And it's always the same people. It's always the same. Those who are you can never get 30-somethings to do anything. They're too busy being materialists, which they all are now. You've got to go for those who are about 45 and over, and they're too busy getting their fucking herbal remedies, which they're all obsessed with their bodies, their wellness, their spiritual, Buddhist, other bullshit practices. I believe there's something else, but I believe we have to take care of nature because Buddha ain't gonna do it, and your Reiki healing energy ain't gonna keep the people who will destroy nature from doing it. Oh, does that mean you come back in your next life as a whatever? I mean, I've heard so much of this fucking bullshit. In other words, maybe if just by trying you come back at a... No. Excuse me, that's all the perfect excuse for doing nothing. And I have a full chronicle of actually over 10 years, 15 years of this. There is a massive legal case that's been started to sue the main owners of the chicken factories along the River Wye for millions of pounds. The rich, greedy people who incomers into the banks of the River Wye, how dare they? Because I know they did nothing, and I do mean nothing, to engage in the normal, dull, bureaucratic process to democratically hold to account those forces which should not have been allowed to develop in that area. I'm going to be writing articles about that truth. Oh, you heretic, how dare you? Nope. Because only the truth, if the next generation, those who are 25, 30 now, understand how this, let's just call it navel-gazing, but it's 1,000 times more serious that, and it does them no good, because I know many of these people, or I knew. I gave up on them all about a year and a half ago. None of them are happy. Most of them don't even sleep well. Half of them are on Prozac. And guess what? I know their kids, many of their kids, behind their painted-on little smile of like workshops and Christina Wright's fake Steiner play group of Hay on Wye, which I diligently attended. Their children have almost all ended up pathetic, wet fuck-ups. That sounds unpleasant. Their children would respect them had they fought to protect their environment. These the middle-class, educated, musical, artistic parents who set up little farmers' markets. Because they're elitist, they never last long. They're literally a cult, and they do actually comprise almost, I'd say, not the majority, but the great majority of anybody who's moved into that region. It became a theme park of cults who do nothing to protect the environment. And how dare they have launched a legal case? Because I care only about the truth. Millions of pounds are going to be spent on that legal case. Many of these small towns along the borderland, England and Wales, don't even have a youth club. This will achieve nothing. The only thing that will help the next generation, those kids who may have played in the River Wye and wonder why it's now sterile, despite being at Fairfield School, despite having lovely parents who go to nice little things at the Globe and drink craft beer and are painters, and most of them are ex-musicians, meaning they once did a gig once in some fucking sleazy Camden pub when they were 19, and they're still talking about it aged 60 in the Globe at Hay on Wye. There'll be other places in Hereford the same. They'll want to know why their parents did nothing, absolutely nothing, because they did nothing, and that's the reason, especially the River Wye, but other small rivers were also damaged. Now, do nothing. Most of these people came with money. They have partners who basically are con artists themselves, so they have a little bit of a functional unit. I stood up to the development at Titley. From the first planning meeting, I put my hand up and said affordable housing. I think it was 2015, it may have been 14, in the village hall. There were many people there. They hissed, "Oh, single mothers, blacks, drugs." I'm not kidding. Literally, you could hear those sounds. Within a year, 2 years, the local area plan, they had a vote, and due to work I'd done behind the scenes, it was at great personal danger. Because if that massive development of likely to end up as eventually, they do it in groups of 6, so they don't have to pay the tax. If you have to have a development of more than 6, you have to pay a levy to the council. No, they do it in little parcels of 6. 6 1 year and then 6 a few years later, and etc. It would have ended up with probably 30 or 40 large Tesco brick executive houses. There was a couple of million quid in that land if that planning permission could eventually be got by the dreadful farmer that, okay, everybody admitted they absolutely knew this woman was frankly evil, Angela, after her husband had committed suicide. So she wanted to cash in and fuck off to the Bahamas. Literally. I was at great personal risk. Nobody would support me. I couldn't even talk to anybody about doing things behind the scenes to eventually propose this more balanced development at Balance Barnes, just so happens, that they would make far less money out of. That's enough to get you run over. And for many years I didn't have a car. I would be cycling the lanes back and forth from Kington to into the woods behind Titley where I lived, and they all knew me. I was at great risk. So it's not just a case of I haven't got time or I don't really want to get involved. No, I was at great risk, just as I've been at great risk to highlight various farmers actually illegally spraying right next to the Arrow. If they knew about me, I'd get hurt. Now, forget about me. What I do know is nobody, I'm sure one or two people did one or two things, but they did nothing to ensure a coherent group of ordinary people, because the rich, the attention seekers, which is what they are, they're here for a few months, but then they'll be in they'll be at their cousins in Italy for the summer or whatever. No, you have to have humble, ordinary people who live in a region most of the time and are going to be living in that region for the next 5, 10, 20 years. They democratically take things forward so as to provide a resistance. No, these effete, incoming, beautiful people, blah, 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 basically gradually took over the public space where they performed. Oh, we care, so we're going to start up this initiative. Get a slot on Radio 4. Of course, they have all their Facebook friends, like, worship them, and then they never do anything. They don't make sure that there are loads of people, and that includes lots of people from the housing estate who they deny even exist. Let's have people from the housing estate, because they'll be fishermen too. Can we have 50 people at this planning meeting, please, in respect of the next great big mega chicken factory being built close to the Y? No, they're far too fancy pants to have done any of that basic hard work. And as I say, the great mass of those who, mainly women, in fact, I'm sorry, it's so horrible to say it. I consider myself a feminist, but mainly women in family units in areas like West Herefordshire, all of Herefordshire, in fact, who will say that they speak for their family. They're the person in their family who's environmentally sensitive and aware and cares. They would perform this time and time again at the tables in markets where environmental matters are being promoted, etc. I spent hours of my life around these people. They would perform it piously and then would do nothing. And worse than that, they would actually undermine one, snidely chip away. Oh, your energy's not quite right for us. For somebody who's trying to quickly, because I don't have much time either, just organise. Do we know that we've actually got these 10 people definitely who are coming to a meeting and also giving lift share to somebody down the road they may not like, but they know that that person will be on our side? Nope. The whole thing for years was they're too good really for that. And if anybody else is doing what they know deep down, because they're not stupid, needed to be done, they would actually be undermining them. Why? Because that shows up how awful and effete and snide, and they are the reason these massive factory farming conglomerates could get away with what they've done. And guess what? They're not stupid. The massive agricultural conglomerates knew that too. They knew that nobody followed through with their little Facebook like and actually came to a meeting. They had people at the meetings. It's laughable. They are the reason that the environment of all of Herefordshire, half of East Powys, which is rephrase that, East Powys, which is now following, seeing that the factory farming organisations got away with murder in Herefordshire as of 7 or 8 years ago. Massive new planning applications all over East Powys, because they saw none of these people None of these people, those with their kids at Steiner School, who preach at oneness with nature, none of them did anything substantial to block the progress in Herefordshire. They saw that. I've been making a joke to people for 10 years. I bet you at Harvard Business School, and actually this is not a joke, they have a file, a ring binder of, like, if you've got loads of billions of quid or millions to invest, where are the places in the developed world where you can pretty much get away with anything and nobody's going to do much about it other than put a load of posts on Facebook? Oh, top number one, Herefordshire and East Powys, Hay-on-Wye, Fairfield, Peterchurch, all of these places where the nice tribes of music and arty people ended up, all of whom say they are so in tune with nature. They do nothing except put stuff on their Facebook, and we can monitor exactly who they are and prove to you they do nothing. The end. I've probably missed a really important... Oh, yes, there's like 3 or 4 other major environmental matters that I personally have been interested in, at great danger to myself, and forget it. This all started in 2002. The Warren, which was the most fantastic over 10-acre wildflower meadow for many, many miles. When Foot and Mouth came along, the warden was a man called Allen, and the whole village... the sheep were put on this deliberately to destroy this wildflower meadow, and nobody helped him. I wasn't in a position then to help myself, really. I was busy with divorce, looking after my kid alone, and a few other things. But Alan ended up committing suicide. He was a nice man, I knew him. He ended up committing suicide because the area he'd looked after diligently and cared about immensely over many years was cynically, as these are the people, as they came into the region, the farming forces in the area, as soon as they saw an opportunity, Foot and Mouth came along. So it's like, oh, they accidentally let some sheep get out onto the Warren. And because there were restrictions in place, it meant that they weren't allowed even to remove them back out of that Warren, huge natural meadow, wildflower meadow. That had been there decades, probably much longer. And thus that broke. There was a trust, it's called the Warren Trust, that was meant to keep that wildflower meadow pristine. It broke the rule of the trust, which meant the trust rules were that sheep couldn't be moved on until August. But no, they managed to get sheep on, and once they were there, they couldn't be moved. So that meant the wildflower meadow was destroyed. And subsequent to that, the Warren Trust, I think they would be getting £200 a year for grazing for the sheep, which then could go on all the year round because there was no longer a meadow to protect. That was done by 3 or 4 greedy farmers who just couldn't give a fuck and despised the nature protection people. The nature protection people have to operate diligently and forcefully for a reason. That you have. I was brought up on a farm. My parents weren't farmers, but I lived with farmers around where I lived in North Wales. You have to have a very, very effective... It's a war. I'm sorry. You're fucking Dorothy Watkins kind of, oh, it's all love and the vibrations of the universe. No, it's a war. It's always been a war. And pleasantly, because I'm a pacifist and I never do aggression, you have to face up to the other side and use effective, hard-working, organised means to keep the greedy buggers at bay. None of these people ever did. There we go.